Good day, everyone. This is Decadent Kelvin Tagat. For today, we will talk about global divide. So we are the group one. On behalf of my groupmates, I'll introduce to you our members: Decadent Tagat Kelvin, Decadent Moradas Mark David, Decadent Villa Plaza Walmart, Decadent Del Rosario Mark, Decadent Argula Charles, Decadent Cabaluna Fort Louis, Decadent Solia Mario, Decadent Ryan Christian, and lastly, Decadent Dimangay NJ. So this is for the completion of our reports, Social 101 Global Divide. Let's start with our introduction. Introduction. So this presentation is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardenis, to use this as educational material. Now, let us start with our objectives. So the objectives of this report is we will be able to discuss the following. First, how did a global divide develop? Second, why the global divide why global divides the north and south? Third, what is the difference between the third world and a global south? And lastly, define the term global south or differentiate a global south from the third world. And also analyze how a new conception of global relation emerged from the experience of Latin America countries. So that is our objective for this report. What is global divide? So according to our research, global divide is the concept of global north and south or north-south divide in global context. It is used to describe a grouping of countries along the lines of socio-economic political characteristics. Since globalization is an even process, it creates an imbalance in socio-economic and political categories. The world is divided into north and south and the first, second, and the third world. These two sets of division or concept are used interchangeably in common conversation because they are related but are actually different.
So let's talk about the origin of global divide. The origin of dividing countries into the North-South divide arose during the Cold War of the mid-20th century. So what is the Cold War? The Cold War was called Cold War because of the featured heavyweights, the Soviet Union and the United States, were nominally at peace, but they engaged in circling each other, jabbing each other, testing each other's supposed weaknesses in every part of the world. In the Byzantine politics of the United Nations, and in a couple of dozen other international organizations. During this time, countries were primarily categorized according to their alignment between the Russian East and the American West. It had many causes, but there were two main issues that split the nation. First was the issue of slavery, and second was the balance of power in the federal government. And what are the causes of global divide? So there are many causes for these inequalities, including the availability of natural resources, different levels of health and education, the nature of a country's economy and its industrial sectors, international trading policies and access to markets, and how countries are governed and international relationships between nations.
So why the global divide between the North and the South? So way back 1980s, the Brandt line was developed as a way to show how the world was geographically split into relatively rich and poor nations. So the Cold War era generalizations places countries into two distinct groups, which is the North and the South. So global North is the home of all members of the Group of 8, I think, then Canada, France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, Russia, and USA. So it also prefers to the developed countries that are comprised of all first world and most of the second world countries. Meanwhile, the South is comprised of the third world countries. Global divide between the North and the South, often referred as the North-South divide. So it's a complex and multifaceted issue with historical, economic, political, and social dimensions. So it is primarily refers to significant disparities in wealth, development, and access to resources. So between the more economically advanced and industrialized countries often of the northern hemisphere, and the less than developed and the often poorer countries of the southern hemisphere. So these are there are many what you call this causes of these inequalities, including the availability of the natural resources. So different levels of health and education, the nature of the country's economy, and its industrial sector. So international trading policies and access to markets, and how countries are governed, and international relationships between countries, conflict between the countries, and the country's vulnerability to the natural hazards and climate change.
There are several key factors that contribute to this divide. So one of these is historical factors or colonialism or exploitation of resources, and economic factors or global economic system burden, political factors or geopolitical power, corruption and instability, and social factors, health and education inequality, environmental factor, e.g. climate change, and globalization. So, why the global divide between the North and South? There are countries in the South that have made significant progress in recent years, and there are disparities within both the Northern and Southern hemispheres. So, the statement highlights differences in development and progress between countries in the Northern and Southern hemispheres. So, some countries in the Southern hemisphere have shown significant advancements in recent times, be it in economy, technology, or social development. However, disparities and inequalities in terms of resources, infrastructure, and overall progress still exist within both hemispheres. So, this emphasizes the need for addressing these gaps and promoting more balanced development worldwide to ensure equitable opportunities and standards of all living for all. So, efforts to address the North-South divide include development assistance, debt relief, fair trade practices, and international cooperation on issues like climate change and sustainable development. However, achieving greater global equity remains a complex and ongoing challenge. So, this statement talks about efforts made to bridge the gap between more developed, often in the northern hemisphere, and less developed, often in the southern hemisphere countries. So, these efforts include providing assistance for development, reducing the debt burden of poorer nations, ensuring fair trade practices, and collaborating globally on important issues like climate change and sustainable development. Despite these efforts, achieving a fair and equal world is a complicated and continuous struggle due to various challenges and complexities. It emphasizes the need for ongoing, coordinated efforts to make the world more balanced and just for all nations.
What is the difference between the Third World and the Global South? The term Third World and Global South are often used to describe regions and countries that face various socio-economic challenges and are not part of the more economically advanced First World or Global North. However, there are important differences between these two terms, and they have evolved over time. The term Third World originally originated during the Cold War era and was used to categorize countries based on their alignment with either the Western Bloc or the First World or the Eastern Bloc, Second World. Countries that did not align with the bloc were referred to as the Third World. Over time, the term Third World acquired negative connotations as it was often associated with poverty.
The term Global South emerged as a more inclusive and less politically charged alternative to Third World. It is often used to refer to countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Oceania that face various development challenges. The World Global South recognized that many countries in these regions are diverse and have different levels of development and economic strength.
It also acknowledges that some countries in the Global South have made significant progress in terms of economic development and human development indicators. The term Third World and Global South are related but have evolved over time and can be used in slightly different contexts. Third World originally referred to countries that were not aligned with either the Western Bloc, led by the US and its NATO allies, or the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union and its allies. During the Cold War, it encompassed a wide range of countries with diverse economic, political, and cultural backgrounds. However, today, the term is considered outdated and can be seen as a pejorative or simplistic. Global South is a more contemporary term that emerged as a replacement for Third World. It, it encompasses countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Oceania, which tend to have lower income level or less development infrastructures and face various socio-economic challenges. The global south also includes some economically developing regions within countries that might be considered part of the global north. While both terms refer to regions with similar characteristics, global south is considered a more inclusive and culturally sensitive term compared to third world, which is associated with the Cold War era. It's worth noting that both terms are broad and can oversimplify the complex realities of individual countries within these regions. And in conclusions, although the terms Third World and Global South are similar and both refer to areas and nations that face development issues, Third World has its roots in Cold War politics and comes with a baggage of the past, and the phrase Global South is more inclusive and modern, emphasizing socioeconomic issues rather than having the same geopolitical implications. Therefore, Global South is frequently favored in contemporary talks about inequality and global development. That's all.
Definition of Global South. The term Global South is a contemporary concept used to refer to a group of countries primarily located in Africa, Latin Americas, Asia, and Oceania that share common socioeconomic and developmental challenge. Characterized often associated with Global South, including lower income level, higher level of poverty, greater economic inequalities, and less access to resources between the Global South and the Third World. The term Third World originated during the Cold War and was initially used to categorize countries based on their alignment with Western or First World or Eastern Second World blocs. In contrast, the Global South is more contemporary and exclusive term that focuses on socio-economic and developmental issues rather than political alignment. The term Global South is a broad and involving concept, and not all countries within his categories fit this characteristic uniformly. And additionally, some Global South countries have made significant progress in various areas and are considered emerging economics. These characteristics provide a general overviewing of some of the challenges and opportunities often associated with the Global South. Global South is characterized by economic challenge. May Global South countries face issues such as poverty, income inequalities, unlimited access to resources, and opportunity. They often have less developed and diversified economies. Historical factor. Global South countries have typical experienced colonialism or other form of exploitation which have left lasting economic and social legacy.
Differences between Global South and Third World. Political connotations. Third World carries political connotations associated with the Cold War era, while the Global South enlists political charge and emphasizes development challenges. Scope. The Global South in a broader and more diverse concept, recognizing that not all countries in these regions are uniformly underdeveloped. Some Global South countries have made significant progress in terms of economic development and human development indicators. Emergence of a new conception of global relations from Latin American experiences. Latin American countries have played a significant role in shaping a new conception of global relations, and several factors have contributed to this. Emergence of a new conception of global relations from Latin American experiences. Several factors. Number 1. Political movements. Latin America has been hotbed of political movements and ideologies that have challenged traditional global power structures. This includes movements for independence from colonial powers, socialist revolutions, and populist movements. These movements have often advocated for more equitable global relations. So differences between Global South and Third World is the term Global South, however, whilst also being a euphemism for developing countries, is generally used in the context of the economic and developmental disparity between countries in the northern and southern hemispheres. The proportions of developed countries is far higher in northern hemisphere than in the south, hence the term. The term Third World historically refers to countries that were aligned neither with the communist eastern bloc of countries nor with the capitalist west during the Cold War. This includes countries as diverse as Botswana, India, and Sweden. In current culture, however, that term is normally used as euphemism for developing countries. So the Global South is much better, but the countries belong to Global South. Its lack of human rights and abuse natural resources, while the Third World is a country that underdeveloped. Their similarities is also lack of human rights.
Emergence of a new conception of global relations from Latin American experiences. So, economic policies. Some Latin American countries have pursued alternative economic policies that challenge the dominant neoliberal economic model. For example, countries like Venezuela, Bolivia, and Ecuador have adopted policies aimed at reducing economic inequality, nationalizing resources, and challenging the influence of multinational corporations. Emergence of a new conception of global relations from Latin American experience. Regional integration. Latin American countries have increasingly sought the strengthen regional integration through organizations like the Union of South American Nations and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. These initiatives aim to promote regional cooperation and reduce dependence of traditional global powers. Emergence of a new conception of global relations from Latin. So diplomacy and alliances. Latin American countries have engaged in diplomatic efforts to promote a multipolar world order. For example, they have forged alliances with other global south nations and have advocated for reforms in international institutions like the United Nations to make them more representative, and inclusive.
So my groupmates were able to discuss the emergence of their conception of global relation from Latin America experiences and the several factors. Now let us proceed with our summary for the conclusion for that report. So based on their discussion, we concluded that Latin American nations have promoted regional integration, advocate from the alternative economic models, and also they engage in diplomatic attempts to reconstruct global governance, all of which have aided the formation of new paradigm of international relations. This reflects a larger shift towards more multipolar and equitable global order that gives voice and consideration to the countries that belongs in a global south. So I guess that will be all for now.